He asked me to care for his sick cousin, then I heard him whisper, darling, to her. So I made a call. Of course, I have regrets. I am 63 years old. I have only recently realized that my family has never really respected me and that I wasted too much time. However, why should that be the case? It's always better late than never. My 64-year-old husband and his alleged first love, a woman of 59, don't seem to feel old at all. They lead bold, carefree lives and are even planning to start another passionate relationship. I had just arrived at the hospital entrance when I saw Franklin holding his so-called cousin Evelyn's hand tenderly. His soft, gentle voice sent a shiver down my spine. Evelyn, darling, you need to take care of that injury once you're out of here. Once you're out of here, we'll head home together. Margo will continue to look after you, and I'm sure you're happy with her. Your housekeeper. Evelyn smiled, her voice light. You're so kind. I don't know what this fall really made me realize that I'm getting old. Franklin laughed and teased her about it. You said you were going to go hiking with me once you're better, so of course you could not break our promise. She replied with a smile. The other people in the room watched with envious looks on their faces. This couple is so sweet. Their bond is really something, Franklin said again, his tone soft and sentimental. She was my first love when I was young. Oh my, how romantic you two are. I stood frozen in the doorway, my hand shaking so much that I almost dropped the insulated lunchbox containing the soup I had spent the entire morning preparing, a light, nourishing meal especially made for a patient. Franklin had always been succinct and direct in his messages, but ever since his so-called cousin made a correction, they exchanged a smile, and no one knew the truth, they weren't even a couple. He had been sending me lengthy voice notes every day, telling me exactly what to cook, how long to simmer, and what ingredients to use. He insisted that I make a soup that was both delicious and nourishing, and I was rushing home to take care of the rest of the family while juggling everything. At the hospital, I hardly had time to close my eyes, but it turned out that she wasn't even a cousin. I was still standing in the doorway for days when I heard someone say, Sir, I need someone to help take care of my father because I've been so busy at work lately. Could you please share her contact information? Franklin froze for a moment before giving a vague, dismissive response, carefully avoiding the question, and then I felt a chill go up my spine. He didn't even try to clear up the misunderstanding. To protect the dignity of his beloved first love, and he was more than happy to let me think that his wife was a hired housekeeper. I was so angry that I almost stormed in and tore them both to pieces with every word I'd been swallowing for days, but then I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror at the end of the hallway. Evelyn, with her broken bone and her refusal to do anything for herself, had all the time in the world to keep herself pampered. I'd been the one to bathe her, change her clothes, clean up after her daily activities, and keep her hair pinned up in a beautiful twist. Then there was me, a worn-out old woman with messy hair and a pale, exhausted face reflected in the mirror. I was wearing a loose, cheap shirt and baggy pants, holding an old, chipped food container in my hand, and I was sweating the entire time. Franklin sat next to her, looking elegant and refined but still sharp and dignified. He was wearing a crisp, neatly pressed shirt, the same one I had ironed for him myself, with not a wrinkle in sight. Previously, I was that charming girl too, with my own youthful glow. I had once been admired, courted, and cherished, but now, all that was left of me was exhaustion and the fading warmth of a pot of soup and anger. Twisted together with shame and helplessness swirling inside me like a bowl of bitter broth gone cold, I looked absolutely pitiful, and the contrast between me and the two people in that room couldn't have been more stark. It was as if we belonged to different worlds. Do you regret it? Was a question that suddenly rang in my head so clearly that it felt like it was exploding from deep inside of me. I froze, my heart clenching so tightly that it felt like it might stop. The force of that one question almost took my breath away, and my knees went weak beneath me. It was such a simple question, but it cut right through me, exposing everything I had been too scared to face. I wasn't even sure how to start responding to that. Yes, what Franklin and Evelyn had done infuriated me, embarrassed me, but what hurt even more was realizing that I had somehow become so disposable in my own marriage. When I arrived at my son Nathan's house, my palms were still wet, as though I had just woken up from a bad dream. My little grandson Miles rushed up to me, tugging at my hand and yelling, "Grandma, I'm hungry." The sound brought me back to reality because I hadn't had time to get used to it. My daughter-in-law Dana yelled from another room, "Margo, can I?" Was about to go to the laundry room when my phone rang. The old, lagging phone took a while to connect, but then Franklin's calm, familiar voice came through. "I just got back from a business trip, and I'm at the hospital. Why haven't you brought over dinner yet?" I froze, forgetting that I'm still at Nathan's helping out. They haven't finished the laundry, the dishes aren't done, and Miles has painted everything. You grab the diapers. Even though his voice was gentle, I could tell he was growing impatient. If you had told me earlier that you couldn't come, I could have arranged things differently. Evelyn still needs care and can't go without food, so finish up there and come over here when you can. I stared at the phone in my hand, its call still active, and a bitter smile tugged at my lips. Miles was still clinging to me, demanding that I take him to get a hamburger. The whole house was so loud that I felt like I was having trouble breathing. I was standing in the doorway of the kitchen when all of a sudden, like a voice echoing back from the bottom of my heart, I thought, have you noticed that they never ask if you're hungry or if you're tired? They just take from you, asking you to cook, wash clothes, and take care of the kids, taking all your time, energy, and patience. Maybe it's time you asked yourself if they've always been like this, or did you at one point silently allow it to happen? As if finally ready to acknowledge what had been in my heart all along, I whispered softly to myself, maybe it began when I was young because I was taught that girls should be obedient, listen to their parents, and then listen to their husbands. When they're married. What they wanted, I gave. I never said no. Memories flooded. My heart started to ache, and my eyes started to sting. When did I start confusing being needed with being loved? When did I stop asking myself what I wanted and only care about whether others needed me? Franklin held my hand when we got engaged and said, I'm going to college, and this home will depend on you. My parents said, your brother is still in high school, and we need money for his tuition, so we can't afford to send you to college too. You should let that go. I gave up my college acceptance letter and left everything behind. Even before we were married, I started looking after Franklin's parents, treating them like my own. Afterwards, after graduating from college and getting married, Franklin found a job teaching at a university, but his goals went beyond being a typical professor. I took a job at a nearby diner and even considered taking night classes to better myself, but he rejected the idea right away. Margo, where's that job going to take you in night school? What about the house? Your job is to keep the house running so I can focus, that's all I need. Years passed, and Franklin's career took off. People started referring to him as a distinguished professor and a renowned scholar, and I was in the kitchen, in the laundry room, on the never-ending road of raising a child. I didn't argue with you because I thought he was right, I think that was just what I was supposed to do. No one could have predicted that the man who stood so confidently in front of a lecture hall couldn't even iron his own shirt or turn on a stove at home. When our son Ethan grew up and had his own family, I thought I might finally have time for myself, but he said, Mom, we just bought a new house, and with a new baby on the way, we really can't afford a nanny. We're counting on you. And then? In an instant, the cycle began all over again, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of Ethan's family. It seemed like life had always been written that way, and the days blended together until I had the idea that a nanny would be a cook. Something tightened in my chest, a heaviness I couldn't shake, and I stood there unable to speak, swallowing the ache rising in my throat. I looked out at the dusky sky, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something fierce stirring inside me. Being a postpartum caregiver is one of those jobs that would cost thousands of dollars a month, but I'm the wife, mother, and grandmother, and I do it all, and no one has ever paid me a dime. They haven't even thanked me. I'm 63 years old, and even though it feels late, I can't continue to do nothing. I want to live with strength and dignity at the very least, and if I don't stand up now, the next 20 years will be like the last time I was drained, dismissed, and invisible until I was too old, too tired, and too broken to speak at all. I need to learn how to say no to their incessant demands and to a life where I am treated like I don't. The words had barely left my lips when Nathan yelled at me, How can you say that you know we can't afford a nanny? You're not in pain, you're just being lazy again. I told Nathan that my back had been hurting me lately and that I couldn't keep doing this anymore, taking care of everything for Dana after the baby. I'm getting older, I just can't handle it all. If you still need help with the baby, then hire someone. Passed through me like a blade, but this time I didn't back down. A thought crossed my mind, he earns $155,000 a month and has over $200,000 saved, can he really not afford to hire help? It wasn't about money, he simply didn't want to spend it because, to him, I've always been free labor. That thought strengthened me, my voice became sharper. I'm over 60, I really can't do this anymore. If you need help, pay for it, don't expect me to bear the burden of your life for you. I had never spoken to my son in such a firm manner in all these years, but this time I knew I had to, and as a wave of relief passed, another thought came to me, good, that's step one. Now tell me, are you really going to keep pretending everything's fine and keep serving your husband's first love? Like nothing ever happened? In my mind, the scene at the hospital flashed back, and a sharp pain shot through my chest. I shook my head softly, saying, no, I won't, not because of love or an unforgettable past or any of these sentimental, out-of-date words. But I refused to allow myself to be treated this way any longer out of dignity, so I picked up the food. Container and went to the hospital one last time. Evelyn was talking to a nurse about her glory days playing with an orchestra abroad when she saw me enter the room, and she smiled casually. Margo, could you wash my towel for me? This mattress is way too firm. Could you go pick up a cushion while you're out? She used to call me Margo, and she never misses me. Her tone always carried the same condescension those wealthy women used when bossing around their hired help, Whitmore. I didn't respond, I just put the container down on the small table. This is the last pot of soup. Her eyes flickered. What's going on, Margo? Things are getting too busy at home. She gave me a saccharine smile. Well, maybe I'll have Franklin. Hire another caregiver, you've done so much already. I stared at her fake concern, and then I laughed. If you want help, let your Margo, I think you're misinterpreting her. She didn't even finish the sentence, and some of the people in the room, who had gushed about their sweet relationship days earlier, were already staring at her with wide eyes. I didn't hold back. Franklin fed me some bullshit about you being a distant cousin, and I believed him. You've been sitting here acting like the ideal guest, letting me wait on you hand and foot while you and my husband lied about your relationship. I narrowed my eyes and spoke in a cold tone. You're intelligent, well-connected, and respected by everyone you meet, but let me tell you that whatever decency you once possessed must have been fed to the dogs a long time ago. Because her face turned pale and flushed, and her lips trembled, but she was unable to speak. I didn't bother to look again, so I turned and left, and she was left pinned to the bed, humiliated. The onlookers, who had been silently observing, started whispering among themselves, "Oh my God," so I didn't stop, I didn't turn around, and I didn't let them talk that night. Franklin's face was dark with anger as soon as he entered the front door, and he immediately stormed into the study, dragging me in after him. Have you gone insane? What the hell were you thinking saying all that nonsense at the hospital? If you had questions, couldn't you ask me privately? Did you really have to make a scene in front of everyone? Do you think embarrassing me like that does you any good? When we were younger, Franklin would sometimes say nice things about me, like, "You're a good mother and a devoted wife." However, as time passed, he became less affectionate, but he never lost control like this. He never looked at me with such cold, furious eyes, finger pointing in the air, as if I had done something unforgivable. I looked him in the eye, and instead of feeling angry, I felt crystal clear. What did I do? I said each word sharp, and I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to overthink it. Yes, Evelyn was my first love. I admit that we had a history. But we never crossed the line. I still married you, didn't I? Franklin clenched his jaw and took a slow, heavy breath, trying to control himself. Was it me who purposefully lied to my wife and made her wait on an old flame? Was it me who flirted with a former lover in front of strangers while passing for someone we weren't? I thought you could take care of her because you're good at it and I trusted you, but now, Margo, you're letting jealousy cloud your judgment because of something that happened years ago. He spoke like a man who was confident in his own righteousness, wrapping his words in moral superiority as if he were the only one acting with dignity and good intentions. She was alone in the hospital for decades, and her kids live overseas. Is that a crime? When I said, I want a divorce, it came out like a bomb in the house. Franklin's face turned pale, he gasped for air, and he sank into the couch, speechless. Are you insane? He barked, pounding his chest. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm just incredibly exhausted. I felt sorry for the woman who had dedicated her life to serving this man, giving him all of her youth, patience, and identity. Nathan was even quicker to react, calling me as soon as he heard the news. He's still at work, Mom. Have you lost it? Do you even realize what you're doing? Do you know who Dad is, what kind of status he has, and who you are compared to him? You're really going to throw your good life away over something like this? My voice was steady. This is a decision I've thought about for a long time. Do you have any idea how humiliating that would be for me at this age? My coworkers and students will say that Nathan is already wasting. I looked at the pile of laundry waiting to be folded in the living room and the stack of dishes still unwashed in the kitchen sink. Franklin couldn't stand a single speck of dust in the house and changed his clothes at least twice a day. Every little detail had to be perfect, and for years I had been the one holding it together. Nathan's tone sharpened. You've been idle at home too long, and now you're going stir-crazy. It all together, but he never saw any of it, it was just my job and my responsibility. Nathan continued talking on the phone. Mom. Let's face it, your father is much more educated than you, and you've never really had anything in common, so what if he still thinks about his first love occasionally? It's not like he cheated, you're both getting older. Are you really going to split the family up over an elderly woman? My voice went cold. So you believe it's okay for your father? To the moment he used the word dramatic, it felt like a cold needle piercing my heart. Suddenly, a memory of my son when he was a little boy came flooding back. Franklin was always busy with work back then, and I was the one who raised him every day. He used to call me mommy in his soft, tender voice and say, "Mom, you work so hard every day." That's not really lying, Mom, you're overreacting. What's the big deal about bringing her some food and offering assistance? When I grow up, I'll make sure you don't have to work so hard anymore. But he's so self-righteous that he couldn't have imagined that one day, because of his father's mistress, he would look me in the eye and say, "Stop being so dramatic." I laughed bitterly and hung up the phone. I decided I was leaving this house and would start living on my own, and the day I packed up, Franklin stood there looking expressionless and icy. I immediately straightened my back and responded, "You think you're going to do after the divorce? You're just a housewife, you have nothing to fall back on. First, I didn't do anything wrong in this marriage, and I'm entitled to half of everything in this house after the divorce. Second, I've been helping raise Nathan's child since day one, if he needs a reminder. I've been working like a full-time nanny for years without ever charging him a dime." Dana arrived shortly after, obviously rushing over after hearing from Nathan. In an attempt to defuse the situation. Margo and I are both women, so I know that what Franklin did was wrong, no question about that, but don't let this one incident cloud your judgment about marriage. I almost felt a twinge of tenderness before she continued, but the fact that she was raised by you too and that this home wouldn't be the same without you brought me back to reality. I calmly looked at her and let her finish her well-intentioned but self-serving plea before Franklin said, "Dana, don't waste your time. I've worked my entire life to earn money so she could enjoy hers, and now she wants to throw everything away over this nonsense." I've never seen a more self-centered wife, and his eyes grew colder the second Margo said, "I'm not giving you a cent." I won't lie, my heart was racing with fear when I walked out that front door because, at my age, it was the first time I'd ever left this family to try to figure out how to stand on my own. It was strange at first, almost unsettling. But I was fortunate that a few close friends who heard what had happened stepped up to help me. They pulled together some money to get me on my feet, and I was officially living alone. I had no more laundry for everyone or cooking for a house full of people. At first, I didn't realize how long a day could feel when no one was pulling you in 10 different directions. Franklin would occasionally still text me, "Margo, where's that blue shirt I used to wear? Did you pack? Ignore those socks, the food at the campus cafeteria is terrible. I miss your pasta." Dana messaged Margo to stop being so obstinate, and "Miles has lost weight without your nutritious meals." She even sent a video of Miles yelling for Grandma to come home. I knew I shouldn't let any of that bother me because I had made the right choice. Raising a child is their responsibility, not mine, and I owed no one any guilt because I had done nothing wrong. A quieter voice inside me would push back that cooking is a skill too, and even small diners didn't want an elderly woman in their kitchen. Eventually, a small local restaurant offered me a trial run for a few days to see if my cooking could keep up. The place wasn't large, just a dozen or so regular students who came in for meals and occasionally a few tired young people. I started to doubt myself because most companies turned me away because of my age. I worked there for a week, putting my all into every dish, but the owner brought in a new chef. The woman gave me a kind but aloof smile, "Margo. It's not that. I don't appreciate your effort, but some of the students said they were uncomfortable because they were worried about food hygiene because of your age." I stood there for a few seconds in shock, knowing it was just a pretext to let me go, but I was at a loss for words, and I felt terrible for not being more careful and for not having a better plan for not preparing a safety net, but instead of letting the disappointment fester, I brushed it off, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself, "Where there's a will, there's a way." The following morning, I carried a steaming pot of chicken soup to my neighbor Jasmine's door and gently knocked. She was a young woman in her 20s who was constantly rushing in and out, working long hours, and I knew she had a difficult job. Her eyes lit up as soon as she opened the door and smelled it, and she took the bowl from me and drank it all at once after the last sip. "The other day, I overheard you and your friends talking, and you mentioned that you missed real home-cooked meals but that you didn't like cramming in with all the students at those spots." Jasmine nodded completely, and I thought, this is amazing. After a night shift, getting to drink something like this is heaven, Margo. If you ever opened a small diner, I'd be your first customer every day. I told her everything about how I was fired from the diner and how I was trying to figure out how to provide for Ward. Then, a little nervously, I asked, "If I cooked at home, would you and your friends be interested in ordering meals from me?" Jasmine paused to consider, and I quickly added, "Don't worry, I've been married to a man who had obsessive cleanliness standards, so when it comes to hygiene, I'm meticulous. I've worked in the kitchen for decades, so there's nothing I don't know how to make. If you ever want something different, I can learn." I truly mean it. Jasmine smiled politely, saying, "Let me think about it and get back to you." My heart sank a little, but I understood that most of the time, that's just a gentle way of saying no. To my surprise, however, the following morning, as I was ready to leave to look for work, I opened the door and saw Jasmine standing there, with a few friends behind her. Margo. We discussed it, and we think your idea is fantastic. If that works for you, we're happy to pay for weekly meals in advance. My bank account started to grow, but more significantly, for the first time in decades, I made money on my own. I couldn't stop smiling, and a warm, unfamiliar sense of pride welled up in my chest. This is what it feels like to make something of your own. My family had never seen it that way. To them, cooking was just something I was supposed to do, nothing more, nothing special, nothing worthy recognition. But as time passed and Jasmine and I became closer, I began to think that perhaps it was something after all. She frequently complained at meals about her controlling boss, who drained her of all her energy, refused to give her raises, and treated her like a machine. Gradually, I started to share my own story as well. After hearing everything she had to say, I was furious. Margo. I had assumed that such things only occurred in melodramatic novels, but I quietly laughed. There was a dull ache in my chest. Perhaps that's why it's so difficult to sense when I'm changing my mood. Jasmine quickly shifted the topic, and by the way, Margo, those shrimp you made yesterday were incredible. How did you cook them? Will you teach me? I began guiding her through the steps, and she listened carefully, nodding at each one as if she were taking notes. The following day, she sent me a picture of her own version of the salt and pepper shrimp, which made me laugh and tease. I paused for a moment before realizing that I might actually be good at teaching people how to cook. Jasmine had never been in a kitchen, but she understood everything I said, clear steps, logical instructions, easy to follow. Then another thought crossed my mind: what if I filmed these recipes? What if I taught people how to cook through short videos? My heart skipped a beat. You were a disaster in the kitchen, but it looks like you picked it up pretty quickly, she replied with a playful emoji. The idea sparked a sense of excitement, purpose, and even hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. I never considered this as a possible path forward, so I was both excited and afraid. Who would watch an elderly woman like me teach home cooking? Isn't that stuff reserved for young people with fancy lighting in perfect kitchens? Would anyone even care? My mind was racing with self-doubt, and I began to list all the reasons why it wouldn't work, but then a quieter but firmer voice interrupted. A more sensible idea came to mind: even if it fails and no one watches. The worst-case scenario is that I go back and admit I failed, but immediately after I did that, I clenched my jaw and said out loud, almost defiantly, why should I admit failure? I haven't done anything wrong, and I realized I wasn't saying it for nothing. You're going to cook anyhow, aren't you? It's not like you're wasting anything, just a little time and effort. I was saying this for myself because, throughout my life, from childhood to old age, no one had ever urged me to try something new or told me that I could forge my own path and dream outside of the kitchen sink. I thought about Franklin, and the truth was that, even in our early marriage, I had sensed Evelyn's presence in his life, but by that time, we were already living together and building a home. I tried to get a glimpse of his world, and when I remembered the time he was away on a business trip, I went into his study and selected a few of his books in the hopes of understanding them. He looked at me with that cold, distant gaze when he returned, and he asked, "You went into my study?" There was something sharp in his voice, so I laughed awkwardly to lighten the mood. I had just borrowed a few books, and I wanted to see what you were interested in, so maybe we could talk about them. He narrowed his eyes. You want to talk about N? Do you even understand any of it? I smiled sheepishly. No, but maybe you could teach me. He smirked and shook his head. I stopped trying after a few rejections like that. I learned to keep quiet and not to embarrass myself by going beyond the roles he set for me. Looking back, that was the moment I became trapped in a label, a life that was defined by kitchens and laundry rooms and that I remained in for decades. I began learning how to make videos, edit footage, and create content that people would actually want to watch. A week later, I signed up for a TikTok account. I made a TikTok account and called it Margo's Kitchen. After that, I uploaded my very first video in front of the camera. I was obviously nervous, and my voice even faltered a little as I said, "Hello everyone, I'm Margo. Today, I'm going to show you how to make a light, comforting vegetable soup, and share a few tips on how to make pork ribs tender and flavorful." I recorded the entire cooking process, going over each step and describing the small tricks I've learned over the years in the kitchen. The platform is full of gorgeous young people with flashy edits, snappy jokes, and trendy background music who would spend more than a few seconds watching an old woman like me boil soup. I wasn't expecting much, and sure enough, there were no surprises. Views trickled in slowly, and the majority of the likes and comments came from Jasmine and her group of friends. I was a little disappointed, but I couldn't say I was surprised. A few days later, I opened the app and saw something new. New comments had appeared beneath the video. It wasn't difficult to figure out where these came from. I asked Jasmine, And she promptly assisted me in turning off the sync feature and patted my shoulder. Don't take it personally, Margo. Everyone starts at zero. I asked, Cook, Mom, if you have this much free time, why aren't you at home helping with the grandkids instead? My hands trembled with anger. Cooking down isn't the problem, you just need to keep working on the content and observe how other creators in the same niche shoot and edit. Let's learn together one step at a time. Her words truly touched me and gave me newfound confidence. I told myself, this time, I'm not giving up so easily. This was the first time in my life that I was working on something solely for myself, and I wasn't going to let a few hurtful remarks break me. Aside from cooking for my small group, I was going to see it through from that day on. I joined a few online creator groups, mostly composed of young people, but instead of making fun of me for being in my 60s, many of them encouraged me to be amazing. One person said, "You work harder than most of us," so I continued uploading gradually. Day by day. Of regulars, I spent almost every free moment learning. Things started to change. Comments like, "I can't eat dinner without your cooking videos playing in the background, it's so comforting," and direct messages from people asking how to make beef stew with potatoes or stir-fry vegetables to keep them crisp appeared, and before I knew it, I had a few thousand followers, and they were calling me Grandma Margo, which warmed my heart. For the first time in my life, I felt a kind of confidence I'd never known, not because someone handed it to me, but because I built it myself. I thought Nathan was kidding, but I see you really are doing this stuff now. I replied coolly, if young people can do it, why can't I? His lips curled into that familiar sneer I had known for years. One recipe, one hard-earned step at a time. That day, Franklin arrived at my door. His eyes scanned the room with a clear, unspoken disdain. He noticed my phone stand on the kitchen counter with the camera light set up, and he raised an eyebrow, muttering, "Even comprehend how this works?" I didn't know at first, but I can learn, I said, holding his gaze, and Franklin shook his head in that patronizing manner. I knew Margo so well. This isn't something a woman your age should be doing. You've been a housewife for 30 years, so why start playing around with this now? His words made me feel both angry and incredulous. Franklin, how could you say something so beneath you? Isn't that what you always preach? Live and learn, lifelong learning? I raised an eyebrow, wondering why it's acceptable for you're supposed to keep learning new things, but when it comes to me, I'm not supposed to. You're getting older, too, but you still travel across the nation to attend academic conferences and workshops. Isn't that a waste of time too? He was taken aback and muttered to himself, I'm not like you. Yes, we're not the same. I answered quietly, but my smile was icy. You've never thought of us as equals, you've always believed that I was merely meant to revolve around you. Franklin hesitated, unable to refute my statement, but a moment later he spoke. In private, I confess that I've always felt that Evelyn is the only person with whom I can truly connect and with whom I can share my thoughts and feelings. Nevertheless, I kept my word and married you, spending my entire life with you. What more could you want? I looked at the man who had been with me for 30 years, and his tone was filled with bitterness. You want me to be thankful that you married me, and you believe that I should just voluntarily waste my life on you, your family, in the kitchen, and doing tasks you never. I had never spoken so bluntly to him before, and I had never pierced his ego with such bluntness. Franklin's face turned from pale to flushed as he struggled to find the right words. But I stood there thinking that a line I had read a long time ago echoed in my mind. You can't take away a woman's wings and then blame her for not flying. I felt that my sacrifices deserved respect, but you only saw me as a clueless housewife who wasn't supposed to learn, get better, or live for myself. Franklin, you are the one who has been terribly wrong. You can't fill my life with pots and pans, and then stand on some moral high ground laughing at me for not understanding the poetry and vastness of the world. That day, Franklin left my house with a face as dark as thunder. The very next morning, a courier arrived with the signed divorce papers. I laughed and couldn't remember where I had read it. Perhaps it was a line from a book I had surreptitiously perused. Sincerely praised him, saying, "It's about time you finally came to your senses," so he could dive into his so-called great romance with Evelyn out in the open without the burden of pretending. But Franklin shot back coldly. Nathan was right, saying, "You really are throwing away a perfectly good life just to prove a point. If you're so desperate to stir up drama, then fine, I'll give you what you want. I'm just curious to see how you'll survive without me." I didn't bother to argue. Shortly after, Dana called me, her voice filled with complaints. "Margo, it's unbelievable that Franklin brought Evelyn home to live with him. He was bold as ever and didn't even try to hide the fact that Evelyn had recently finalized her own divorce before moving back to the country. Over the years, Franklin had earned a lot of money from speaking engagements and seminars, and when we got divorced, I got my fair share of the marital assets. However, as soon as the money reached my account, Nathan and Dana began requesting money from me in a variety of ways, always claiming to be doing it for Miles. I didn't sugarcoat my response because you people are parents. Raising your child is your responsibility, so if your lifestyle is out of your price range, perhaps it's time to stop acting like you can afford it. Nathan yelled at me right away, calling me selfish and accusing me of not being a mother at all. However, after Evelyn moved in, his tone changed instantly. At first, he was worried that Evelyn might be there to claim the inheritance, but when she began splurging for gifts and accruing miles for pricey extracurricular activities, his tone changed. I gave Nathan a cold smile, saying, "You're just like your father, entitled and ungrateful." I only hope Miles doesn't grow up to be just as selfish and spineless a few days later. Nathan's attitude completely changed abruptly, and he was all smiles and good manners. He even had the audacity to make fun of me. "Mom. Look at Evelyn, she's not even my real mother, and she's more generous than you. No wonder Dad would prefer to be with her." Nathan retrieved the same TikTok account he had previously used to make fun of me and posted a new video. The screen displayed a golden sunset streaming into the living room, with Evelyn standing by the window playing the violin and Franklin sitting close by, grinning at her like a love-stricken schoolboy. The caption was incredibly sentimental, and even though 30 years had gone by and their hair and faces had grayed, the way he looked at her remained the same. The video went viral, even making it to the trending page, and the comment section was flooded with praise. "This is what true love looks like, they're such a perfect match." Some even recognized Franklin, referring to him as a reputable college professor. Others commented, revealing Evelyn's previous career as a violinist in a prestigious orchestra, even mentioning that the two had once been college sweethearts. Nathan promptly sent me the viral video in a private message, saying, "Mom, you've been working hard on your little cooking channel for months and barely gained followers. One clip of Dad and Evelyn and boom, look how much more attractive they are." I wrote back and smiled, but perhaps I should start sharing the less appealing parts of their past with a few gossip pages. I'm sure that would go viral even faster. Nathan snapped back, saying, "You don't even have proof. Who would believe you?" I didn't bother responding because I had better things to do. I stayed focused on my own life, continued to film my videos, continued to cook, continued to share bits of my world, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I was living it on my own. On my own terms, my following continued to grow, and my content's engagement increased daily, until one day I received my first paid sponsorship. I was so excited that I bounced around the room laughing aloud like a girl who had just received her acceptance letter to college, thinking, "See who said I couldn't do this?" Maybe it was because they saw that I was actually making money. Nathan quickly joined the trend as well, starting to create his own videos and establishing a persona around the warmth of a middle-class family, with his star players being none other than Franklin and Evelyn, the ideal intellectually elegant couple in their prime. His videos featured the two of them cooking together in the kitchen, walking hand in hand in the garden, and occasionally he even pulled Miles into the frame to try to create the illusion of a picture-perfect, loving home. It made me think of the times I was responsible for dropping Miles off and picking him up from. Miles looked directly at the camera, grinning sweetly, and said, "Grandma Evelyn, you're so pretty and elegant you can even play the piano your way better than my other grandma." I didn't feel much after watching that clip because children rarely speak without influence. On weekends, preschool took him to the park to push him on the swing and kick a soccer ball around. However, Evelyn took a completely different approach, taking him to elite enrichment programs, music immersion classes, museum lectures, and even horseback riding lessons. Nathan was quick to respond to a comment under the video that said, "Kids shouldn't be taught to compare and diminish their real grandmother like that. What's wrong with telling the truth?" Nathan asked, "My biological mother abandoned her husband and her family, she doesn't even care about her own grandson. My stepmother is 1,000 times better than she ever was." I stared at his comment, astounded by the ridiculousness of it all. He was actually trying to write a story that portrayed me as the antagonist. It had nothing to do with me now because what I had broken free from wasn't just a household, it was their power over my emotions. I continued to update my cooking videos, respond to meal orders, and live my own life until the day when Dana called me in tears. By the time I arrived, I had fallen off a horse. Family could shine even brighter. I looked down at my phone and laughed dryly. They must have really thought this would hurt me, but it didn't. At the hospital, the hallway outside the ER was in disarray. Evelyn appeared completely disorganized, with no sign of her typical poise or elegance. Nathan was sitting on the floor, holding Miles in his arms, his face twisted with fury. Franklin was sitting in a corner, his eyes hollow and pale, and his trembling voice filled me with fear. Miles was only 5 years old, still at that wild, playful age, and had initially found horseback riding exciting, but after a few lessons he began to resist, but Nathan didn't want to miss a good video opportunity. And Evelyn had reassured him that once Miles learned to ride, they would get incredible footage that would go viral. They disregarded his discomfort and dragged him to the stables anyway. Then, when tragedy struck, Franklin sat with his head in his hands and muttered, "Now you want to blame Evelyn. Weren't you the ones who agreed to it too? All of you wanted those videos and the attention." Dana exploded. "How are we supposed to know it was that dangerous? She was the one who insisted that it was completely safe," and now Evelyn scoffed. Her voice cold and sharp, and said, "What, I forced him onto a horse at gunpoint. I paid for the lessons, and the riding school had safety protocols. He took off his harness himself. How is that my fault?" She added sarcastically, "This kind of nonsense happens when a kid is raised by an uneducated woman." Franklin froze for a second, as if he had heard Evelyn's true voice for the first time. Miles's condition, and then Dana. Franklin looked at me with his lips parted as though he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. By that time, Evelyn had calmed down, and she shot me a chilly look and said, "You came here to gloat. Don't bother, I've got money. I'll cover all of Miles' medical bills. You people can stop bothering me." A few days later, Dana informed me that Evelyn had given Nathan a certain amount of compensation money in secret, and Franklin had. I went back home, sat in the kitchen chopping vegetables, and switched on a podcast. The episode was about a woman starting over after a divorce, and the host read aloud a line about how, after I left, my ex-husband faced his karma and realized that his first love wasn't as perfect as he thought, and he deeply regretted it. I couldn't help but laugh because it sounded a lot like my own life. I knew it was only a story, but sometimes life does mirror fiction. The reality, however, was different. Franklin was a university professor, and Evelyn had been. There was no dramatic, heartbreaking ending here, just the quiet, helpless humdrum of life and restraint. I half joked to myself, if I were the heroine of a novel, shouldn't some miracle plot twist happen? Now, I laugh bitterly because those plots only existed in books. Life wasn't full of coincidences or unexpected benefits. A famous violinist in a well-known orchestra would still be fine no matter how much they shook up their lives. One was going to give me a happy ending on a silver platter, but then something unexpected happened. The very next day, I logged into TikTok and noticed that my follower count had increased by over 100,000. At first, I thought the system was acting strangely, but when I checked my notifications, I discovered that a new video had emerged online. That revealed Franklin and Evelyn's relationship in a way I hadn't anticipated. The host's tone was overtly provocative, leading you to believe that this was a sweet, romantic love. The story, however, is even more dramatic than you might think. Then, it cut to footage from the hospital that day, where Franklin and Evelyn were having a warm conversation and confessing that they were each other's first loves. Then, the comment section exploded as soon as I revealed their true relationship, proving that this woman had been duped by her husband and forced to work as a free maid for years. How cruel these two were to her, treating her like a servant from beginning to end. There were opposing opinions as well, but let's face it, the first wife is pretty average. If it were up to me, I would have chosen the graceful violinist as well. However, these comments were swiftly removed by others, so being average means you should be abandoned. What kind of morals do you have? I hope your dad gets a second chance at life. Let's see if you'll support him. Next, the emotions on the internet surged like a tidal wave, and Jasmine didn't remain silent either. Doing great, and if you want to see more of her life, follow her account, Margo's Kitchen. I watched my follower count grow faster than I thought possible, and I knew that this viral moment wasn't just a coincidence, rather, it was the result of every video I had uploaded, every update I had kept up with, and every bit of effort that had accumulated over time that ignited this opportunity. I also knew that this kind of heat would eventually fade, and the people who truly appreciated me would remain. Buzz can come and go, but what I can do is continue to produce excellent content and maintain my perspective. I began putting more effort into my videos, honing my editing techniques, researching popular subjects, and assessing what my audience enjoyed. I shared everything I had learned in the kitchen over the years, explaining every little trick with clarity and detail. What were once viewers who would occasionally glance at my videos turned into devoted followers who left messages like, "My mom cried watching your videos, and she said she wished she had lived for herself at least once," and someone else wrote, "What I love is more than just your recipes, it's your resilient spirit." For the first time, I felt like I was living for myself, and my life kept improving little by little, even though Franklin and Evelyn were the objects of public scorn. The illusion of their supposed soulmate romance completely fell apart, and they were made fun of on social media, their carefully manicured image dissolving more quickly than they could control. Shortly after they stormed into my house, their faces flushed with rage, and Margo Evelyn snapped her voice sharply. I stood in the doorway and laughed coldly, wondering what I did. I didn't film those videos, I didn't leak your little love story. And I didn't manipulate public opinion. If you want someone to blame, try blaming your own dirty past. Even if none of this had gone viral, my channel would still be standing because I spoke in passing to defend myself, but it turned out that those words were prophetic. The scandal continued to escalate, and Franklin University was unable to ignore the mounting backlash. Academic institutions care more than anything about reputation and public perception, so the administration quickly removed him from the lecturing roster and gave him a polite excuse and temporary leave of absence. More outraged, Neens continued to flood the school with emails and protest messages. Franklin, a man who had spent his entire career basking in admiration, couldn't handle the humiliation, and soon after he resigned, Nathan's account also completely collapsed. Without the romantic glow of Franklin and Evelyn or the gimmicky horseback riding scenes with Miles, no one cared anymore, so he quietly deleted the account, but worse, there were still Miles left. The fragile peace broke completely during one especially heated argument when Nathan lost control and pushed Evelyn at the top of the stairs, causing her to tumble down. Dana wanted to take him overseas for specialized rehabilitation, but the costs were extravagant, so she demanded that Evelyn pay for it all. Evelyn exploded, accusing them of extortion and manipulation, saying they were only trying to take advantage of her for money. Conditions and her previous fracture hadn't fully healed, so this new injury would require a long and difficult recovery. When I saw Franklin again, I hardly recognized him. The man who used to confidently command lecture halls in his tailored suits now wore a wrinkled shirt and walked the hospital corridors hunched. Haggard was pushing a wheelchair with a frail Evelyn slumped in it. When he saw me, something inside him crumbled, his lips quivered, and his voice was thin and broken. Does seeing us like this make you feel satisfied? I shook my head. Franklin. Margo, I made a mistake, I really did. I was blinded and chased after the things I thought I missed in my youth, and in doing so I destroyed the one person who stood by me for decades. You were always there, and I never appreciated it. Do you think maybe we could have a conversation? I said firmly, cutting him off. Don't hate me anymore now, because your life has nothing to do with mine anymore. He froze, staring at me, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. You're here because the life you chose has fallen apart, and you miss the comfort you once took for granted. What's eating at you, Franklin, isn't love, but rather resentment that I ended up living a better life than you did. You made your decisions? And you're the one who must bear the consequences. As for us, we're done. I gave him a small smile and said, goodbye, in a quiet but sincere voice. I then turned to leave, praying. I never considered myself noble, I had just recently discovered how to avoid living a life of self-sacrifice. When I exited that door, I was filled with calm and no longer harbored any resentment or anguish. In my third year of creating food videos for my channel, Margo's Kitchen, I wasn't sure that I had finally let go. Reached 1 million followers at last. What began as a small home cooking series that I made for pleasure has somehow expanded to. Young people started streaming into what many now referred to as their daily source of solace. Comments and private messages expressing their family disputes, work-related stress, and emotional breakdowns, which I felt grandma. Some people claimed that after they got home from work, they turned on one of my YouTube to listen to me demonstrate how to stir-fry a meal or simmer a pot of soup in my kitchen. Was the one source of warmth remaining in their hectic lives. I had thought that life should calm down at this age. One day at a time, I would fade into stillness, but I never thought mine would begin to blossom in these exact years. Finding what it meant to finally live was what gave me a sense of fulfillment, not the number of followers or applause. Naturally, I am aware that no one is assured a steady supply of attention in life and that life does not come with permanent spotlights. Support. I didn't get this voyage by chance, I had to push myself to take that initial step when everything seemed hopeless, which involved me stumbling in front of the camera while trying the recipe after even when I was at my lowest. I continued to upload videos and make recipes in my kitchen despite being made fun of. Choosing not to turn around each time, I greet everyone with a grin and say, hello, I'm Margo. Today, I'll teach you how to prepare a hearty, cozy supper, but in reality, I'm telling myself no. I can always start over no matter how old I am. I'm no longer the quiet, attractive housewife in the background. I'm a 60-year-old woman who transformed her kitchen into astage and turned pots and pans into a whole new chapter in life. I'm confident that this novel will eventually reach its last page. But in the meantime, I plan to live each day to the fullest while I'm still here, so I'll continue to cook and shoot. Continue to read, learn, and share my life with a group of strangers that feel like friends even if I don't. I have no idea how long my videos will be watched or what the next chapter will bring, but I do know I'm going to live a good life from now on. For the remainder of my I shall live my life for myself and no one else.